Leonardo DiCaprio had recently concluded a whirlwind of media tours, premieres, and meetings for a major film project on climate change. For years, he had juggled his career and his dedication to environmental advocacy, a dual path that made him simultaneously fulfilled and exhausted. As a result, his closest friends and team recognized that he was overdue for a break, a journey that would feed his soul in a way no awards ceremony ever could. It was during this lull between commitments that he received a letter, an actual handwritten letter delivered to his home in Los Angeles. The envelope bore a series of foreign stamps and carried the return address of a woman named Dr. Rosalind Murakami, a Japanese-Peruvian anthropologist he had briefly met at an environmental summit 3 years prior. Inside, her message was concise yet brimming with curiosity. Under Sir Leonardo, I hope this letter finds you well. I recall your passion for ecological wonders, particularly regarding hidden corners of our planet. My work recently led me to an expedition along the remote sections of the Rio Enantia, a little-known waterway said to wind through uncharted rainforests in South America. There are rumors of a phenomenon the locals call the River of Echoes, a stretch of water surrounded by ancient labyrinthine caves, where every sound reverberates for miles and illusions meet reality. The tribal communities speak of extraordinary sightings, lights in the forest, voices drifting on the wind, secrets that vanish with the dawn. They claim it guards immeasurable biodiversity and perhaps something more. I believe this place needs global attention, but it's also extremely delicate. I can't trust just anyone. I remember your genuine respect for nature and your will to protect it. Would you consider joining our next expedition? Together, we might raise awareness and protect it. Yours sincerely, Dr. Rosalind Murakami. Leonardo reread the letter several times. The words River of Echoes and extraordinary sightings lit a spark deep within him. Over the years, he'd championed numerous environmental causes, yet there was always a yearning to do more, to see the unknown corners of Earth for himself, to push beyond the boundaries of the tourist-friendly locales. This was precisely the kind of quest that could refuel his weary spirit. He made the necessary calls, cleared his schedule for a month, and arranged to meet Dr. Murakami in a small city near the border of Peru and Brazil. The next few days blurred as he gathered gear, updated his vaccinations, and quietly informed close friends he was heading somewhere remote for an environmental observation. He shared few details. The letter had cautioned against publicizing the trip too widely. When Leonardo finally landed at the tiny airport, the heat and humidity struck him like a curtain of thick, tropical air. The sound of buzzing mopeds and the scent of grilled plantains swirled together, forming a heady introduction to a new world. He found Dr. Murakami standing by a battered Jeep in the dusty parking lot, wearing khaki field pants, hiking boots, and a broad smile that crinkled her eyes. Leonardo, she greeted, extending her hand. I was afraid you might decide not to come. Are you kidding? Leonardo laughed. You basically offered me an adventure. I can't resist that. Dr. Murakami's grin widened. I'm glad. Let's get you settled at the base camp. It's a 3-hour drive, and then another day's boat ride upriver to the real camp. I hope you're ready. I am. Let's do it. As the Jeep wove through the city's chaotic streets and then onto a dirt road that led to the outskirts, Leonardo observed the small shops, the vibrant murals, and the families gathered around open-air food stalls. It reminded him of how large and varied the world truly was, and how vital it remained to defend each pocket of natural beauty from the creeping march of unsustainable development. Soon, the city fell away, replaced by vast stretches of emerald rainforest. Towering trees and thick vines seemed to whisper of countless secrets that only the bravest explorers would ever glimpse. Dr. Murakami explained more details of the expedition. She had assembled a small team, an entomologist named Felix, a local guide named Leah, a sustainability researcher named Marcus, and a pair of documentary cameramen, Jason and Priya. Their objective was to reach a remote part of the Rio Enantia where legend met reality. They intended to spend 2 weeks collecting data on biodiversity, water quality, and any cultural artifacts associated with the region's tribes. Some of these tribes, Dr. Murakami said thoughtfully, claim the river itself speaks. People hear echoes, voices, songs. Some say it's just the acoustics of the caves. But older myths suggest it's the land's way of communicating warnings or guidance. I'm not superstitious, but I am open-minded. We'll see what's really there. Leonardo found himself enthralled, goosebumps rising on his arms. Stories of mystical phenomena in remote jungles had always captured his imagination, like glimpses of hidden truths that modern society had overlooked. If these legends were real, or even partially real, they might shed light on how indigenous peoples perceive nature. And if it was indeed just an acoustic trick, well, that was still fascinating. By the time they arrived at the base camp, a rustic lodge perched at the edge of a lazy tributary of the Rio Anantia, night was falling. The lodge consisted of wooden huts with tin roofs, a communal dining area, and a small generator that buzzed quietly in the background. Leonardo and Dr. Murakami hopped out of the jeep, stretching their cramped limbs. A lean man with sunburned skin and short-cropped hair approached, offering Leonardo a handshake. "I'm Marcus," he introduced himself. "We didn't think you'd actually come." No offense, but most celebrities prefer to do photo ops in safer places. Leonardo smiled, setting aside any hint of pride. "I'm definitely not here for a photo op, promise." Marcus nodded, seeming to appreciate Leonardo's sincerity. Shortly afterward, the rest of the team gathered around a single long table illuminated by hanging lanterns. Leah, the local guide, was a petite woman whose calm demeanor seemed to cloak a wealth of knowledge. Felix, the entomologist, carried a battered insect net and spoke excitedly about the region's insects, which he said could harbor medicinal properties unknown to the world. Jason and Priya, the documentary duo, were already capturing candid footage, though they maintained a respectful distance, keenly aware that the expedition's focus wasn't stardom but discovery. That evening, over a simple but delicious meal of rice, beans, and fried plantains, Dr. Murakami laid out the plan in more detail. Tomorrow, they would set off at dawn by a narrow motorboat stocked with provisions, medical supplies, and research equipment. They would journey upriver, deeper into the rainforest, and establish a more remote camp near the rumored entrance to the so-called River of Echoes. As Leonardo drifted off to sleep in a modest wooden hut, the steady hum of insects lulled him into dreams of winding waterways and ancient, whispering forests. He sensed that this expedition might surpass anything he had experienced before, both in terms of physical challenge and spiritual revelation. Chapter 2 At sunrise, the team convened at a simple dock where two long, narrow boats bobbed. Each boat had an outboard motor, a covering of tarpaulin for shade, and enough space to carry crates of supplies. The group divided in half. Leonardo, Dr. Murakami, and Leah in one boat. Marcus, Felix, and the two cameramen in the other. The watery journey began under a sky tinted with pastel hues, the rainforest on either side a dense tapestry of green. A chorus of birds and insects rose in the morning air. Occasionally, the group would catch sight of colorful macaws or playful river dolphins surfacing for a breath. Leonardo found himself inhaling the humid air with a sense of reverence. Even though the climate was intense, hot, sticky, and teeming with mosquitoes, there was an undeniable majesty to it all. Leah pointed to shapes in the canopy. "Those are howler monkeys," she said with a soft smile, as the distant roars echoed over the water. "They mark their territory that way. Once we get deeper in, we might see tapirs, giant otters, or even a jaguar if we're really lucky." Leonardo nodded enthusiastically. "I've seen footage of them for documentaries, but never in the wild. It's amazing to be here in person." As the hours passed, the river narrowed, winding among thick clusters of towering trees. Occasionally, they had to stop and remove branches that had drifted into the water. Sunlight danced across the rippling surface, turning the boat ride into a hypnotic trek. Dr. Murakami used the time to quiz Leonardo on local wildlife, quipping that she'd happily accept him as a research assistant if he ever left acting. He played along, asking about the difference between two species of parrots perched in the upper canopy. Midway through the journey, the sky darkened with storm clouds. A mid-afternoon downpour sent sheets of rain hammering down, forcing the group to shelter beneath tarps. Visibility dropped significantly, but Leon navigated carefully, guiding the boat to a sheltered cove until the deluge subsided. Such storms were common, she explained, and one had to adapt quickly. They resumed travel late in the afternoon, eventually spotting a small clearing by the riverbank, where the forest parted enough to accommodate their tents. This was the designated campsite, a relatively flat stretch of ground beneath towering kapok trees. The group busied themselves pitching large canvas tents, unloading supplies, and setting up a central table under a pop-up canopy. As dusk settled, the forest around them came alive with the glow of fireflies, the hum of nocturnal insects, and the distant, melodic croaks of frogs. The air was so thick with humidity that Leonardo's shirt clung to him, but he found it oddly comforting, like stepping into a world brimming with life at every turn. Over dinner, instant noodles mixed with fresh vegetables, Dr. Murakami discussed the next day's plan. We'll take a smaller canoe from here, as the river ahead is narrower. About 2 hours upstream, there's a lagoon that merges into a series of limestone caves. That's the place local tribes refer to as the entrance to the River of Echoes. We'll start by mapping the caves, measuring acoustic properties, and seeing if there's any credence to the tales of voices. Felix's eyes twinkled, and the insect life near those caves could be extraordinary. I'm hoping to find new species, some that might only exist in that unique microclimate. Jason, the cameraman, quietly adjusted his equipment. We should be able to get some stunning shots of the cave system, he said, his voice hushed as though not to disturb the night. Priya nodded, already envisioning the cinematic value of capturing the interplay between water, rock, and the shimmering rays of sunlight that might pierce the cave's openings. Leonardo listened intently. Though physically fatigued from the boat ride, he was mentally vibrant, the lure of exploring a hidden natural marvel fueling his excitement. After dinner, he helped gather wood for the campfire, mindful that they had to keep any open flames in check to protect the forest. Leah kept watch for wildlife, occasionally shining a flashlight into the dark undergrowth to deter curious creatures from wandering too close. As he settled into his tent later, Leonardo recalled how Dr. Murakami had described the region, a place where secrets whisper on the wind, waiting for those who listen closely. He wondered if he would truly hear anything, or if it would prove to be an exaggerated legend. His last conscious thought before drifting into sleep was a silent hope that the expedition would do more than capture exotic footage, that it might result in concrete steps to preserve this remarkable ecosystem. Chapter 3 Morning broke in a haze of golden light filtering through the canopy. The team rose early, preparing a simple breakfast of boiled eggs, fruit, and robust local coffee. With Leah at the helm, they set off in a smaller canoe, leaving the main boats behind. The path ahead was indeed narrower, lined with walls of creepers and twisted tree roots that reached into the water like grasping fingers. Leonardo couldn't shake the feeling that each bend in the river was drawing them closer to something extraordinary. The jungle's hush was punctuated by birdsong and the occasional splash of startled fish. Even the breeze had a peculiar softness, as though tiptoeing among ancient guardians. Every so often, Leah signaled for silence, pointing to the movement of animals along the banks. A family of capybaras munching on aquatic plants, or a pair of bright toucans perched on a low branch. Eventually, the canoe eased into a lagoon with waters so calm they seemed like a pane of reflective glass. On either side, imposing limestone cliffs rose, draped in green curtains of moss and vines. The midday sun glinted off the stone surfaces, revealing hidden caverns and fissures. "This should be the place," Dr. Murakami announced quietly. She pulled out a hand-drawn map contributed by a local tribal elder. There should be a network of caves near the cliff face to our right. Let's see if we can locate the largest entrance. They steer the canoe toward a craggy outcrop. Up close, the cliff face towered like a fortress. A gaping, dark opening, half veiled by hanging vines, beckoned from a few feet above the waterline. With cautious paddling, the group maneuvered close, tying the canoe to a protruding rock. They carefully disembarked onto a slippery ledge. Stepping into the mouth of the cave felt like entering another realm. The air was cooler, tinged with the mineral scent of damp stone. Sunlight filtered in through cracks in the ceiling, casting beams that illuminated patches of the rocky floor. Drip, drip, drip. Water droplets echoed in the darkness, magnified by the cavern's natural acoustics. Jason and Priya set up camera lights. The beams revealed a wide passageway leading deeper into the cliff, with a shallow stream trickling along the floor, eventually disappearing into blackness. Dr. Murakami handed out headlamps. "Watch your footing," she cautioned. "We'll take it slow." As they proceeded, the cave's walls widened, revealing strata of limestone laced with shimmering quartz. Stalactites hung overhead like teeth, and the soft glow from their flashlights sparked reflections in hidden pools. Leonardo found the environment both awe-inspiring and surreal, each breath resonating through stone corridors. Felix was already scanning the walls for signs of insects or rare fauna. Marcus measured the temperature and humidity. Liak guided them, pointing out slippery rocks or sudden drops. Dr. Murakami paused frequently to jot down notes, draw quick sketches, and record audio samples of the echoes. At one point, she clapped her hands sharply, and the echo reverberated with mesmerizing clarity, bouncing off distant surfaces in a musical ripple. Then, something unexpected happened. As they reached a curved chamber, Leonardo thought he heard a soft sound, like a distant flute or a gentle hum. He froze, gesturing for everyone to be silent. The group held their breath, but the noise didn't repeat. Maybe it was just water dripping in a certain rhythm, or perhaps his imagination running wild. They ventured deeper, the darkness closing in. Suddenly, a blast of air surged from a side tunnel, as though the cave itself had exhaled. It carried with it a faint whispering sound, impossible to decipher. The phenomenon lasted only a moment, but it left everyone rattled, hearts thumping. Leah exhaled slowly, pressing a hand against the cave wall. "That was unusual," she murmured. Dr. Murakami took a slow, measured breath. "Let's mark this location." The air pressure change might indicate a hidden opening or a larger subterranean network. "We need to be cautious. Cave systems can be unpredictable." They continued onward until they reached what appeared to be a natural cathedral of stone. Stalagmites rose like pillars, and water dripped from the ceiling into a still pool. The acoustics were uncanny. Every footstep, every quiet word seemed amplified. Leonardo noticed that each sound lingered, echoing multiple times before fading into silence. He tried once again to see if any melodic undertone existed in the echoes. Clapping, a short whistle, a few steps. The air around them carried these noises as though weaving them into a tapestry. It was unsettling and magnificent all at once. Marcus turned to Dr. Murakami. "Any theories?" She tilted her head, as if listening. "The limestone formations here might create resonating frequencies that mimic voices or instruments under the right conditions. But I've never heard such a vivid effect before. It's almost as if the caves are responding." Leonardo stepped forward, shining his flashlight on a series of faint markings on the wall. "What are these?" They resembled pictographs, abstract shapes, lines, and spirals etched into the stone. Eroded over time, they were barely distinguishable, yet clearly man-made. Liao leaned in, brushing away some loose grit. She inhaled sharply. "These patterns," she said, "are known in local folklore, some kind of record left by the first inhabitants. My grandparents mentioned them. We call them the paths of the ancients. No one knows their exact age or full meaning, but the elders say they outline boundaries between the tangible world and the intangible. The words sent a chill through the group. They snapped pictures, documenting every line. Could this be the origin of the River of Echoes myth? Dr. Murakami hypothesized that these ancient people might have used the cave for ceremonies, harnessing its unique acoustics to connect with something beyond their day-to-day reality. The notion of stumbling across an ancient cultural site added a layer of responsibility to their expedition. They had come to document biodiversity and phenomena, yet now they teetered on the edge of uncharted archaeological territory. Everyone agreed. They needed to be meticulous, not disturbing or damaging the site. They retreated slowly, returning to the cave mouth with hearts racing. Even as they emerged into the midday glare, the echoes seemed to follow them, faintly lingering in the recesses of memory. The team reconvened on the ledge, discussing their impressions with hushed voices. Priya in particular was wide-eyed. "I've filmed in many extraordinary places," she said softly, "but I've never felt anything like that. It was as if the cave had a presence, like it was listening." Leonardo nodded. "I heard something too. Maybe an echo of an echo. I can't explain it, but I feel we're dealing with more than just geology here." Dr. Murakami removed her headlamp, gazing at the swirling lagoon beyond. "We should keep exploring carefully. The truth might be more complex than any of us realized." None of them could have known how prophetic her words would become, nor how deeply this place would test their courage in the days to come. Chapter 4. Back at camp that evening, the group gathered around a makeshift table lit by lanterns. Despite their fatigue, the air vibrated with excitement. Everyone shared personal reflections on the cave expedition, from Felix's sketches of newly observed insects clinging to stalactites, to the enthralling acoustic phenomena Marcus had captured with a portable recorder. Jason played back a short clip he'd filmed. The echoes were haunting, almost melodic. "It's like the cave is humming," he said in awe. Dr. Murakami nodded. "We'll analyze the audio in detail once we get back. For now, let's keep an open mind. We've just scratched the surface of this system." Leonardo helped Liak chop vegetables for dinner while listening to the conversation swirl. He found his own thoughts drifting back to that fleeting moment where he swore he heard a distant flute or voice. Could his senses have been tricked by the cave's acoustics? Possibly, but something in him resisted that rational explanation. As night settled, the dense rainforest around them buzzed with cicadas and the occasional hoot of an owl-like bird. Priya and Jason took turns filming bits of the campsite routine. Dr. Murakami transcribing her field notes, Marcus reviewing water samples, Felix cataloging insects in vials. Leonardo quietly joined them, discussing how best to present this discovery to the world if it proved to be as significant as they suspected. They agreed that the local community's welfare and ecological preservation must remain paramount. No sensationalizing or turning the site into a tourist trap. Eventually, everyone retreated to their tents. Leonardo settled into a light sleep, lulled by the hum of the forest and the gentle lapping of the river. Sometime in the early hours, he stirred, ears attuned to a faint noise drifting through camp. It sounded like singing? Not quite. More like layered echoes, distant yet distinct, weaving a soft melody. He sat up, heart pounding. Moments later, Dr. Murakami, in a neighboring tent, unzipped her flap. Their eyes met. She'd heard it too. Lia emerged next, holding a flashlight, her expression tense. "It's coming from the water," Lia whispered, shining the beam toward the dark silhouette of trees. "Or maybe from the caves beyond." They stood in silence, listening. The sound rose and fell, whispery and intangible, as if emanating from multiple directions. Eventually, it faded into the nocturnal chorus, leaving the team unnerved. The following morning, conversations circled around that nighttime phenomenon. Dr. Murakami insisted they keep thorough notes. "If we can't find a direct cause, wind, water flow, local fauna, then we may have stumbled on a broader acoustic anomaly linked to the entire region." Felix hypothesized that certain insect species could generate harmonic chirps that, when combined with cave echoes, created that ghostly effect. Marcus questioned whether a hidden underground river system could be carrying sound for miles away. Liao was less technical in her explanation, hinting that the local tribes often refer to these nighttime melodies as messages from ancestral spirits. Leonardo found himself caught between awe and a need for rational grounding. Mystery fueled his creative mind, but he also wanted to ensure they properly documented everything in a scientific manner. "Perhaps we should take a boat ride tonight," he suggested, "and see if we can isolate the sound's origin." The team agreed. Before that, they planned to revisit the cave system with more specialized equipment. Over the next few hours, they readied gear, measuring devices for humidity, temperature, and acoustic frequency analysis. Felix packed his entomology kit for a deeper exploration of flora and fauna inside the caves. Jason and Priya checked the cameras, ensuring they had enough battery and memory cards. By midday, they had navigated back to the lagoon, moored at the same ledge. Under Dr. Murakami's guidance, they split into two subgroups to cover more ground within the branching tunnels. Leonardo, Leah, and Felix took one route. Dr. Murakami, Marcus, Jason, and Priya took another. They agreed on designated check-in times via handheld radios. As Leonardo's group ventured deeper into a tunnel sloping downward, they passed mineral formations that glittered in the glow of their headlamps. Tiny fish darted in shallow pools, translucent spiders scuttled along the rocks, and every drip of water seemed amplified tenfold. Felix was nearly vibrating with excitement, identifying at least 3 species of cave-dwelling insects he'd never seen before. But the real shock came when they emerged into a hidden gallery where the water deepened into a black, mirror-like pool. On the far side stood a natural stone shelf. Atop it sat a row of faintly glowing crystals embedded in the wall, their surfaces shimmering with a soft turquoise luminescence. Leonardo's jaw dropped. Felix moved closer, shining his flashlight. Phosphorescent minerals? Or some kind of bioluminescent algae layered on the crystal surface? Leah frowned. "I've heard rumors of glowing stones, but never expected them to be real." She carefully brushed aside some moss. The crystals pulsed gently, as if alive. It was mesmerizing, a hidden spectacle of nature's wonder. Excitement brimming, Leonardo snapped photos with his phone and the specialized camera. This find alone could revolutionize geological or biological studies. Yet, in the back of his mind, he sensed a deeper enigma at play. Why here? And why in such an isolated, acoustically unique cave network? Their radio crackled, Dr. Murakami's voice distant but clear. "We found something you all need to see. A large chamber with some kind of inscriptions. Are you free to join us?" Leonardo glanced at Leah and Felix. They decided to mark the location of the glowing crystals on a digital map and rejoin the others. Exiting that gallery was almost painful. None of them wanted to leave such a breathtaking sight. Still, the mention of inscriptions intrigued them. Perhaps they would offer clues to the region's history, tying together the acoustics, the luminous crystals, and the voices at night. They navigated back through winding corridors until they heard the echoes of Dr. Murakami's group. Rounding a bend, they discovered a colossal cavern lit by multiple spotlights. The walls were lined with carved symbols, complex figures, swirling shapes reminiscent of those in the smaller chamber they'd seen before, but far more intricate and intact. Marcus pointed to a row of humanoid figures holding circular objects. Another panel showed a maze-like design, riddled with lines and angles that seemed to converge near a depiction of a stylized river. Dr. Murakami stood quietly, transfixed. "I've been to ancient sites around the world. Nothing quite compares to this." Leah approached the carvings reverently. "These are older than anything our villages remember. It's said that the ancestors left messages here, but I never imagined it was this extensive." Priya and Jason filmed everything, capturing the sense of awe that permeated the chamber. Leonardo stepped closer, shining his flashlight on an elaborately carved motif, a large spiral funneling into what looked like a human ear. Resonance. Echoes. Was this an artistic depiction of the region's unique acoustic environment? A chill ran through him. He remembered the haunting melodies from last night, the shimmering crystals, the sense that the very air here was alive with vibrations. Could these ancients have harnessed the cave's resonant properties to create spiritual experiences, or even communicate across vast distances? The idea was both thrilling and unsettling. Felix murmured, "We might be dealing with a lost civilization that understood advanced acoustics and luminescence. This is more than just a natural wonder." The question hung unspoken in the cavern's stillness. If the caves harbored knowledge beyond what modern science had grasped, how would revealing it to the wider world impact the fragile ecosystem and the local communities? As they contemplated the inscriptions, each expedition member felt an undercurrent of responsibility. This was not something to exploit. They needed to protect and learn from it, not desecrate it in the name of fame or profit. Eventually, they decided to head back to camp before nightfall, longing to regroup and discuss their findings. Clutching their new data, photos, samples, recordings, they retraced their steps, hearts still pounding with discovery. The day had unveiled wonders beyond their imagination, but they were all aware that the real mysteries might be yet to come. Chapter 5. They arrived at camp just as twilight painted the sky in streaks of violet and orange. With no time to rest, they fell into a frenzy of sharing. Dr. Murakami explained the inscribed chamber. Leonardo described the glowing crystals. Felix displayed the newly captured insect species in sealed vials, and Jason and Priya showed snippets of their footage. As the sun dipped below the treetops, the forest's evening symphony began. But all eyes remained on the research spread across the folding tables. Digital photos, sketches, water samples, data logs. Marcus and Dr. Murakami pored over everything, trying to form a coherent picture. The acoustic anomalies, the luminous minerals, the ancient carvings. How did they connect? While the team debated, Leonardo noticed Leah quietly slip away toward the river's edge. He decided to follow. He found her sitting on a low wooden crate near the water, her gaze fixed on the darkening sky. He approached gently. "Everything all right?" Leah nodded slowly. "I'm fine. Just thinking." She paused, exhaling. "All my life, I heard stories about magical places in this region, places the ancestors protected. I never truly believed them. Thought they were just folklore. Now I've seen these caves, touched those inscriptions. It changes how I see everything." Leonardo settled beside her, the damp soil cool beneath him. "I feel the same. I've always been an advocate for the environment, but this expedition shows me just how little I know. It's humbling." She offered a small smile. "You understand then. Sometimes I worry about what happens next. If we prove these phenomena exist, a flood of outsiders might follow. Developers, treasure hunters, people who don't respect the land." He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll do everything we can to protect this place. That's the promise all of us on this team share. We'll work with local communities, use our voices responsibly." Her eyes glimmered with cautious hope. "I believe you." They sat there for a few minutes, listening to the murmurs of conversation behind them and the soft gurgling of the river. Overhead, the first stars appeared, reflecting in the water's rippled surface. The night felt vast and full of possibilities, yet tinged with an undercurrent of unspoken concerns. Suddenly, a haunting trill drifted across the water, a high-pitched note that seemed to vibrate through the humid air. Leah stiffened. Leonardo felt a jolt of recognition, recalling the mysterious music from the previous night. Before either could speak, Dr. Murakami's voice cut through the dusk. "Come quickly." Her tone was urgent. Leonardo and Leah rushed back to the central camp, finding the others gathered around Marcus's laptop. The researcher had isolated an audio clip recorded in the caves, a snippet from when the air pressure shifted. He played it, and the team listened in rapt silence. At first, it was just wind and dripping water. Then came a faint chord, almost like a vocal harmony, half buried in the static of echoes. "That's not a normal environmental sound," Marcus insisted. "I've run filters. There's a clear pattern." It resonates at frequencies close to the human voice range. Priya stared at the waveform on the screen. You're saying it could be someone singing? Marcus shook his head. Or something that produces a similar frequency. I don't know, but it's more organized than random noise. We might be dealing with an unknown acoustic phenomenon. Maybe the cave channels wind in such a way that passing wind or water forms these harmonics. Felix rubbed his chin. If that's the case, it might explain the legends of voices. But the question remains, how are they amplified so far? We heard them here at camp last night. I'd like to set up some instruments deeper in the caves, Dr. Murakami suggested. Measure how the sound travels, see if we can replicate it. As they mapped out a plan, Leah described her grandmother's belief that the land sings when it has something to say, a poetic interpretation that resonated with the unusual data they had gathered. Although the scientists in the group leaned toward logical explanations, no one could entirely dismiss the sense of something greater at work. Finally, they decided that the next evening they would stage a more formal investigation in the caves. They'd place specialized microphones throughout various chambers, hoping to capture a full range of frequencies. During that time, a smaller group would remain at camp with identical equipment to detect any external echoes. It was an ambitious plan that would require them to split resources and remain in communication via two-way radios. Risky in a remote, labyrinthine environment, but they felt prepared. The group retired to their tents, minds abuzz with speculation. Leonardo found sleep elusive, his thoughts alternating between scientific curiosity and a deeper, spiritual unease that maybe some truths define neat categorization. Chapter 6 Dawn arrived with a chorus of birds, but the camp was subdued, each member mentally reviewing the tasks ahead. The plan was to spend the day prepping equipment, ensuring every battery was charged, every microphone tested. The evening would bring the real challenge, traveling back to the caves by moonlight, setting up their gear, and awaiting whatever the River of Echoes might reveal. While double-checking his supplies, Leonardo felt a ripple of excitement. He was stepping far outside his comfort zone. No glitzy red carpets or controlled movie sets here, just raw nature and the unknown. Yet he realized how fully he'd come to trust these colleagues. Even though they were from disparate backgrounds, they shared a common resolve: to investigate without exploitation, to preserve while learning. Near midday, they loaded the canoe with audio devices, flashlights, extra ropes, and protective gear. The ride to the lagoon felt more subdued than their first journey. Clouds had gathered, promising afternoon storms, and a wind rippled the water surface. Upon reaching the lagoon, they established a temporary base at the cave entrance. Dr. Murakami assigned roles. Marcus and Leah would remain outside, setting up a perimeter of microphones around the lagoon to capture any external echoes. Leonardo, Felix, Jason, Priya, and Dr. Murakami would enter the cave network with the bulk of the equipment. They would maintain radio contact, exchanging observations every hour. The team shared determined glances, then split up. Marcus and Leah tested the lagoon microphones, ensuring they were sheltered from the rain that loomed on the horizon. Meanwhile, Leonardo and the others ventured into the tunnels with heavier packs than before. Navigating by headlamp, they found the main chambers easily. The acoustics were unchanged. Every step echoed, every whispered conversation bouncing back eerily. Felix placed small microphones in strategic locations, near rocky overhangs, along narrower passageways, and in that hidden gallery with the glowing crystals. Jason filmed each placement, describing it into the camera for documentation. Priya set up stationary cameras at select vantage points, hoping to catch any visual anomalies. Dr. Murakami kept an eye on the clock. "We'll need to be in position by nightfall," she reminded everyone. "Let's finish installing these last few devices, then find a safe observation point." Leonardo found himself drawn to the luminous crystals again. Their soft turquoise glow felt almost alive, pulsing faintly in the dimness. "Has anyone tried collecting a sample?" he asked Felix quietly. Felix hesitated. "I'm wary of damaging them. Plus, we only have basic field test kits here." Analyzing these would require advanced lab work, and removing them might compromise this environment. Maybe a small scraping, carefully. Leonardo nodded, standing watch as Felix used a tiny geological chisel to delicately chip off a minuscule fragment from a less visible area. The piece glowed faintly in his hand, a fragment of Earth's hidden magic. Felix placed it in a sealed vial, labeling it meticulously. The entire act felt both exhilarating and nerve-wracking, a violation of an ancient site's sanctity balanced against the potential for scientific insight. Once the microphones were all placed, Dr. Murakami led them to a wide chamber where they could safely remain for the night. It featured a relatively flat expanse of rock, a small freshwater pool, and enough open space that they wouldn't be trapped in the event of a rockfall. They set up a basic campsite with battery-operated lanterns, sleeping mats, and a small stove for heating water. Night descended gradually, the ambient light from the cave entrance fading until only their headlamps and lanterns pierced the blackness. The hush was profound. Occasionally, they exchanged radio messages with Marcus and Leah, verifying that the lagoon microphones were operational. Outside, the wind had picked up, and they heard distant thunder. Hours ticked by. Dr. Murakami recorded notes on her laptop, analyzing real-time acoustic data from the sensors. Jason and Priya dozed intermittently, cameras at the ready. Felix inspected vials of insects he'd collected, murmuring about potential new species. Leonardo scanned the darkness, hyper-aware of every drip, every scuttle of small creature. He couldn't help but recall Leah's stories of ancestors who once inhabited these caves. Shortly after midnight, the real show began. A soft resonance trembled through the caverns, so faint at first that it resembled the rumble of distant thunder. Then it grew stronger, a rolling wave of sound that surged and receded in pulses. Dr. Murakami's laptop beeped. "We're picking up significant fluctuations. Frequencies, some are well within the range of the human voice." Leonardo stood, skin prickling. "We should see if the glow crystals are reacting." As if on cue, a pale glimmer appeared in the corridor leading to the crystal gallery. It brightened and dimmed in harmony with the echoing sound. Jason grabbed his camera, filming the phenomenon. A swirl of air rushed past them, swirling dust motes in their lantern light. The wave of sound transformed, like layered chords of a distant choir reverberating through stone. The effect was eerie and enchanting, a cosmic lullaby from the Earth's depths. Leonardo felt an inexplicable mixture of awe and trepidation, as though something ancient and powerful was awakening. Priya gasped, pointing toward the corridor. The crystals looked. Their light flickered in pulses, each flicker matching the sonic rhythms. For a surreal moment, it felt as if the entire cave system was alive and communicating through resonance and light. Dr. Murakami's eyes glistened with excitement. "This is unprecedented," she whispered. "There has to be a scientific explanation, some interplay of geology, magnetism, perhaps microorganisms. But it's so coordinated." Felix's mouth hung open. "I've never seen anything like this. Could the crystals store energy from the environment and then release it in reaction to sound waves?" Before they could theorize further, a tremor passed through the floor. Pebbles skittered and water rippled in the pool. A rumbling echoed overhead, shaking dust from the ceiling. Everyone exchanged alarmed glances. Earthquake or a localized cave collapse triggered by the vibrations. Dr. Murakami's voice was steady, but urgent. "We need to remain calm. Let's move away from any precarious formations. Jason, Priya, be ready to evacuate if this gets worse." She radioed Marcus and Leah, who reported no quakes at the lagoon. The disturbance appeared confined to the cave system. The resonant wave continued, though now interspersed with random bursts of static and harsh scraping sounds, as if unseen forces battled within the tunnels. Leonardo's heart pounded. He and Felix helped shift gear away from vulnerable spots. Dust stung their eyes, and the flickering crystals gave the cavern an unearthly glow. Suddenly, with one final crescendo, the sound peaked. The cavern walls vibrated so intensely that lumps of rock broke away, splashing into the shallow pool. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the phenomenon subsided. Silence fell, a silence so deep it pressed on their eardrums. For several moments, no one moved. Then Dr. Murakami exhaled a shaky breath. "Is everyone okay?" Nods all around, though fear lingered in their expressions. Jason panned his camera across the cavern, capturing the aftermath, scattered debris, swirling dust. Priya coughed, leaning against a boulder. That was like a sonic quake. Felix struggled to steady his voice. "We need to analyze that data right away." It almost felt like the system was defending itself or responding to something. Leonardo stared into the passage toward the crystals. They had dimmed but still pulsed faintly, as though settling back into slumber. He couldn't shake the sense that they had just witnessed a phenomenon bridging the chasm between science and myth, rationality and wonder. And perhaps they had intruded more deeply than intended. They spent the rest of the night huddled together, collecting data from the laptop, replaying audio clips, trying to piece it all together. The wave of sound seemed too structured to be random geological noise. The crystal's behavior only added more complexity. At one point, Leah's voice crackled over the radio, asking if they were safe. Marcus reported that the lagoon had remained calm, though they heard distant rumblings echo from within the cliffs. None of the team slept. By the time pale light signaled dawn at the cave entrance, they had gathered enough preliminary data to confirm the event was real, measurable, and profoundly mysterious. Yet the cost, literal shaking of the cave system, reminded them how precarious their presence might be. Exhausted, they decided to return to the main camp and regroup. They needed time to decompress, to analyze the trove of recordings, and to decide what came next. As they carefully navigated back through the tunnels, Leonardo cast one last look at the silent crystals. He found himself whispering a silent vow. "We will treat you with respect, whatever you are." In that moment, he realized that no matter how advanced our technology becomes, there remain places on this earth that guard secrets older than civilization, echoing truths that challenge our limited views. Chapter 7. Weary and exhilarated in equal measure, the team arrived at the main campsite around midday. Marcus and Leah had brewed a strong pot of coffee and prepared a meal of rice and lentils. Though physically tired, the group's spirits were electric with the shared realization of how extraordinary their findings were. They spent the afternoon debriefing, each person recounting the events inside the cave from their perspective. Jason replayed some of his footage on a small monitor. The visual effect of the crystals pulsing in unison with the resonant wave was unmistakable. The audio, when Marcus ran it through his laptop, displayed a waveform so structured it resembled a piece of music, albeit an unearthly one. "This might be a form of natural resonance we've never documented," Dr. Murakami mused aloud. "Some synergy of geology, water flow, and maybe microbial or mineralominescence. The question is, what triggers it? Our presence? Seasonal changes? Tectonic shifts? Or is it cyclical, happening every so often?" Leah interjected softly. "My grandmother once told me the land sings when it's disturbed, when outsiders break ancient covenants. Could we have done something?" An uncomfortable hush settled. The memory of Felix chipping a crystal shard flickered through Leonardo's mind. He clenched his jaw, wondering if that action had contributed to the phenomenon. But he knew it was too simplistic to assume direct cause and effect. Still, the notion weighed on him. Felix cleared his throat. "We took a tiny sample, yes, but the resonant wave occurred throughout the entire network, not just in that gallery." Marcus offered a cautious smile. "Let's not spiral into superstition. This is a scientific puzzle. We've just encountered something outside our usual frame of reference." Nevertheless, the atmosphere remained tinged with unease. By nightfall, the group decided a period of rest was essential. They delved deeper into data analysis the following day. Dr. Murakami also planned to send an encrypted email with preliminary findings to a trusted colleague at university, requesting remote assistance in parsing the audio signals. The next 2 days passed without major incidents. The team remained near the camp, analyzing results and cross-referencing historical or anthropological data. They found hints in old tribal legends describing subterranean, singing stones, and times when the Earth's heartbeat grew strong enough to shake the ground. Some of these legends also mentioned a boundary between the mortal realm and the domain of ancestral spirits, though the texts were fragmentary at best. Gradually, the tension eased. The forest, too, seemed calmer. No strange nighttime music drifted across the river. No tremors rattled the earth. It was as if the caves had retreated into quiet watchfulness again. On the third morning, an unexpected visitor arrived at the camp. An elderly tribal man, known simply as Tuma. He traveled in a dugout canoe, accompanied by a younger companion who introduced himself as Tomas. Word had reached their village that outsiders were studying the River of Echoes, and Tuma, who was reputed to be the last living guardian of certain ancestral rites, wished to speak with them. Dr. Murakami greeted Tuma respectfully, offering him a seat and fresh water. Through Tomas's translations, Tuma spoke of a prophecy, that one day, strangers would come seeking the cave's secrets, and if they did not show reverence, the land would react with fury. Leonardo, heart-pounding, knelt nearby, listening intently. Tuma's eyes shone with a clarity that belied his apparent age. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of centuries of oral tradition. According to Tuma, the ancients had discovered a realm beneath the earth where sound held great power. They built a network of carved chambers to harness the resonant frequencies for healing, communication, and spiritual insight. Over time, most forgot the old ways, and the city fell into ruin. Yet the guardian swore to protect the domain from exploitation. He paused, gazing directly at Leonardo, as though sensing his sincerity. Then, Tomas relayed a final warning. The stones listen, the water remembers, and the echoes carry messages. Disturb them lightly, or be prepared for consequences you cannot foresee. The hush that followed felt like a collective breath held by the entire jungle. Dr. Murakami thanked Tuma for sharing his wisdom, promising they meant no harm. Tuma nodded gravely, then departed with Tomas, leaving the camp in a contemplative silence. That evening, the group debated how to proceed. Some felt they should wrap up their research quickly and leave the caves undisturbed, perhaps returning with a more qualified archaeological team in the future. Others argued that the world needed to know about these wonders sooner rather than later, especially if they faced potential threats like deforestation or illegal mining. Leonardo voiced a balanced view. Whatever we do, we must include the local tribes in the decision. Tuma and his people have a stake in this land that goes back generations. We can't just barge in, declare it a scientific discovery, and walk away. Dr. Murakami agreed, stating she'd reach out to local NGOs that specialized in indigenous rights. Marcus added that maybe they should hold off on publicly releasing any footage until they secured a plan for conservation. The group concurred. The last thing they wanted was a media frenzy that might invite looters or unscrupulous developers. That night, Leonardo sat by the campfire, replaying Tuma's words in his head. Disturb them lightly. The phrase echoed with each crackle of burning wood. He remembered how enthralled he'd been with the luminous crystals, the illusions of voices in the dark. Now, the weight of the region's living heritage pressed on his conscience. He mulled over the complexities of being both a public figure and a human being who wanted to do the right thing. The jungle around him felt more alive than ever, humming with unseen energy. Though he was no stranger to using his platform for advocacy, this situation felt different, more intimate, more fragile. He resolved to walk carefully, to respect the invisible boundaries Tuma had spoken of, and to ensure that whatever story emerged would be one of preservation and reverence. Chapter 8, At First Light, the team set a new course of action. They would do one final sweep of the cave system, collecting essential data. Then they'd rendezvous with local community leaders to discuss how best to protect the site. Dr. Murakami worked on an outline for a research paper that would highlight the significance of the phenomenon without divulging explicit locations or sensitive data. Leonardo helped stow gear into the canoes, feeling an odd mix of anticipation and sorrow. He'd grown attached to the rainforest's rhythms, the tapestry of bird calls at dawn, the shimmering reflection of trees on the water, the sense that every leaf and stone possessed a hidden story. Returning to Los Angeles felt almost surreal, like stepping back from a profound dream into ordinary life. The morning's journey was serene. A thin mist draped the river, diffusing the sunlight into a gentle glow. Leah guided them expertly, her eyes scanning the water for submerged logs or sudden shallows. No one spoke much, lost in private thoughts about the wonder they had uncovered and the duty that came with it. Upon reaching the lagoon, they discovered a group of villagers gathered near the entrance, apparently alerted by Tuma. The meeting was cordial, but tinged with caution. Tuma himself was present, along with a handful of younger men and women who eyed the expedition with curiosity. Through Tomas's translations, Tuma reiterated his desire to see the caves remain unspoiled. Dr. Murakami thanked them, offering to share any findings that might help the community, whether in ecological preservation or cultural reaffirmation. Leah translated her words into the local dialect. Tuma listened, then nodded solemnly. It was a fragile alliance, but an alliance nonetheless. With a sense of collective responsibility, only a small subset of the expedition re-entered the caves: Dr. Murakami, Leonardo, Marcus, and Leah, while Felix, Jason, and Priya stayed behind to greet villagers and begin preliminary steps toward a cooperative management plan. They wanted to gather any final samples or readings needed for a complete data set. Then, they would leave the site in peace. Though the group braced for more acoustic phenomena, the cave system remained strangely calm. The passageways felt silent, as if the land withheld its voice, waiting for them to depart. They revisited the inscribed chamber, capturing higher-resolution photos of the carvings. They checked the luminous crystals, which still glowed faintly but showed no dramatic pulses. Marcus's laptop indicated minimal acoustic anomalies. "It's like the system's gone dormant," he remarked with a touch of disappointment. Either that was a one-time event, or it might be cyclical over longer intervals. Leah touched the cavern wall lightly. "Perhaps it knows we're leaving," she murmured. Leonardo could only nod. He'd witnessed enough strangeness to respect such possibilities. On their way out, they paused near a small alcove where the water formed a clear pool. Leonardo stooped, gazing at the reflection of the stalactites overhead. In that moment, a faint echo, like a barely perceptible sigh, drifted through the corridor. He froze. Dr. Murakami and Marcus heard it too, turning sharply. Leah's eyes widened. They held their breath, waiting. The sound came again, a soft whisper that seemed to carry a note of farewell. Then silence. Leonardo felt goosebumps rise on his arms. A final echo, he thought, or perhaps a figment of imagination. Either way, it underscored the ephemeral magic of this place. Exiting the cave, they found the lagoon bathed in golden afternoon light. The villagers, along with Felix, Jason, and Priya, were conversing peacefully. One elder woman offered Dr. Murakami a handmade pendant carved from local wood, presumably a gesture of friendship or gratitude. She smiled, accepting it with a slight bow. The expedition group packed up their gear. After exchanging farewells and thanks with the villagers, they took to the canoes once more, heading back downriver toward the main campsite. Tuma remained on the shore, standing still as a sentinel. Leonardo turned back to wave. Tuma lifted his hand in a slow gesture of acknowledgement, his figure growing smaller and smaller until the bends of the river obscured him entirely. An hour later, they reached the campsite. The rest of the day was spent disassembling tents, securing crates of specimens, and double-checking that they left no trace behind. The forest seemed subdued, as though acknowledging their imminent departure. Rainforest expeditions often took a toll on the land, but this team had tried to tread as lightly as possible. That night, they held a final dinner. Priya filmed short interviews where each member reflected on the expedition's outcome. Dr. Murakami spoke of bridging scientific inquiry and indigenous wisdom. Marcus highlighted how the acoustics might rewrite textbooks on geophysical phenomena. Felix marveled at the biodiversity hidden in the region's nooks and crannies. Leah expressed hope that the caves would remain protected, a living testament to her ancestors' legacy. When it was Leonardo's turn, he paused, choosing his words carefully. I came here expecting to see incredible things, but not to be changed by them. The River of Echoes showed me there's still so much we don't understand about our planet and how we connect to it. My biggest wish is that we learn from these experiences without destroying what makes them beautiful. If the world ever discovers this site, let it be with respect and humility. His sincerity resonated around the circle, and the group toasted with bottled juice, eschewing alcohol in honor of local customs and the seriousness of what they'd encountered. The flickering lanterns cast dancing shadows across their faces, each one reflecting a shared bond forged by wonder and discovery. Chapter 9. The next morning, they dismantled the final pieces of camp, loaded the larger boats, and began the long trek back to the base lodge. The descent down the Rio Anantia felt almost like leaving a sacred temple. Leonardo recognized a pang of melancholy, as though he was parting ways with a once-in-a-lifetime friend. At the base lodge, life carried on as usual. Cooks preparing local dishes, workers repairing boat engines, occasional travelers passing through. Yet to the returning expedition team, the ordinary bustle felt jarring. They had been immersed in an extraordinary realm, and stepping back into familiar reality required an emotional recalibration. They took 2 more days at the lodge to rest, clean equipment, and finalize documentation. Dr. Murakami arranged a conference call with her academic contacts, carefully sharing only partial data until the local communities gave full approval. Felix inventoried the numerous insect samples, excited about potential breakthroughs in medical or environmental research, while maintaining strict protocols for ethical collaboration with local stakeholders. Leonardo found quiet moments to reflect on how he would handle public inquiries once he returned to his celebrity life. The notion of standing on a talk show stage discussing a hidden cave that might hold advanced acoustic or geological secrets felt surreal, and potentially dangerous if done insensitively. He decided he would speak in general terms about safeguarding uncharted ecosystems, refraining from sensationalizing specifics. If pressed, he'd mention the importance of local communities and the respect owed to them. On their last night at the lodge, the entire team gathered around a small bonfire near the river's edge. They laughed, exchanged stories, and teased each other about the moments of fear or wonder that had defined the expedition. The communal spirit was tangible, something rare and precious. At one point, Leah handed Leonardo a small wooden flute etched with spiral patterns. "A keepsake," she said, flushing slightly. "It's not the legendary flute from the caves, just a local craft. But if you ever hear echoes, maybe it'll remind you of your time here." Touched, Leonardo thanked her, running his fingers over the intricate carving. He promised to safeguard it. That night, lying in the lodge's modest cot, he thought about Tuma's words, the luminous crystals, and the hush of those ancient caverns. Even if he never returned, the memory would resonate within him, urging him to keep fighting for the planet's precious secrets. Chapter 10. Departure day arrived. One by one, small planes ferried the team from the rustic airstrip back to civilization. Leonardo was the last to leave, sharing final hugs and expressions of gratitude. Dr. Murakami planned to remain in the region a bit longer to coordinate with local authorities and indigenous councils, ensuring any next steps were collaborative. Standing on the dusty tarmac, backpack slung over his shoulder, Leonardo gazed at the horizon of lush rainforest. He inhaled one final lungful of warm, humid air. Then the plane's engine roared to life, carrying him aloft. As the aircraft climbed, the endless green canopy spread out below, the snaking river reflecting shards of sky. In the weeks that followed, Leonardo found himself back in Los Angeles, juggling script meetings, charity events, and social engagements. Yet he felt changed. The city's lights, the ceaseless rush of traffic, and the glimmering surfaces of show business all seemed flatter somehow, lacking the raw vibrancy of the Rio Anantia. He craved the hush of hidden caves, the echo of water dripping on ancient stone. Letters arrived from Dr. Murakami with updates. The local community leaders, in partnership with an environmental NGO, had initiated protective measures around the region. They aimed to declare it a conservation zone with strict guidelines limiting access to scientific research and indigenous visits. Official recognition was slow, but the foundation was laid. Leonardo quietly supported these efforts, donating funds through a discreet trust. He used his public platform to advocate for the respect of indigenous knowledge, referencing remote ecosystems in South America without revealing specifics. Journalists pressed for details, but he sidestepped, insisting that certain places must remain shielded from the exploitative gaze of mass tourism. In private, he revisited the expedition footage, courtesy of Jason and Priya. Late at night, he'd watch the luminous crystals and replay the resonant wave that shook the cavern. He'd see himself and the team standing amidst dust and swirling echoes, eyes bright with awe. Each time, his heart pounded with the memory of that intangible chorus. Occasionally, rumors surfaced on social media, half-baked theories about hidden civilizations or DiCaprio's secret cave. Some tabloids sensationalized the story, proclaiming he discovered a lost city. But nothing concrete emerged, overshadowed by more pressing global news. And that was precisely how Leonardo wanted it. Let the river of echoes remain a whispered fable. One day, an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a photograph showing Tuma and several elders gathered at the lagoon's edge. Their faces were stoic but peaceful, standing as living guardians of a land that defied easy explanation. A brief note in shaky script simply read, "The echoes remain. We keep watch. Thank you." Leonardo felt a lump in his throat. He pinned the photo on a private bulletin board in his home office, alongside pictures of friends, family, and cherished film memories. This photo, though, took on a special resonance. It reminded him of the pledge he had made, to approach nature not as a conqueror, but as a respectful guest. He returned to daily life, to film sets and environmental conferences. Yet in his quieter moments, he often found himself playing that small wooden flute Leah had given him. He couldn't coax it to produce the otherworldly tones of the caves, but its mellow notes transported him back to the shimmering lagoon, the glow of crystals, and the hush of centuries-old secrets reverberating in the dark.